Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well trained, well equipped, and battle hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944.
Hello, welcome to the second video in the Atlantic Wall Campaign game tutorial series. Here I'll show you how to set up the battlefield map, give you an idea of the size of the play area you'll need for the campaign, and then talk about my setup and some of the problems and solutions I've found. Now, just two reminders. First, this series is based on the full logistic and strategic rules. No simplified or optional rules or optional airdrops will be used. And second, all references will either look like this for the October 2016 version of the Atlantic Wall Scenario Rules, or like this for the July 2020 version of the Gauss System Rules. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get started. Alright, in this section of the video, I'll explain how to set up the battlefield map for the campaign. Now, the game comes with 6 34 by 22-inch map sheets and one 34 by 9-inch map extension. Each of the 6 larger map sheets is identified by a letter from A to F found under the game's logo, printed somewhere around the edges of each of the map sheets. Here is the identifier for map B, for example, found on its western edge. And here is the identifier for map E, found in its southwest corner. The extension for map F has no printed identifier. Okay, when arranged, the 7 sheets should look like this, with map A in the northwest and map F and its extension in the southeast. However, there is another small extension located here, which you'll need to cut from map A and place in the southeast corner here. And the complete battlefield map with both extensions should look like this. Okay, to arrange the maps, if you start with map A and go in alphabetical order, each map goes under the ones you've already placed. So, map B goes under map A, map C goes under map B, and so on. Now, don't try to line the maps up using hex numbers. They reset at map boundaries and are often absent or hidden at the edges of map sheets. Instead, use terrain features like roads and rivers. If they all line up, you can be sure you've done everything correctly. By the way, to do this, I arrange the maps roughly, lay plexiglass over them, and then reach under the plexiglass to make small adjustments. I've found that without something holding the maps down, it's almost impossible to line them up properly. Now, let me give you an idea of how big of a play area you'll need. The footprint of the battlefield map is 80 3/16 inches from west to east, and 79 1/8 inches from north to south. So, rounding up, you'll need an area of at least 81 by 80 inches. But you'll also need space for displays and charts, and I've found that a play area of 96 by 84 inches will give you all the space you need. Now, to make an area that big, I use 2 tables, both of them 96 by 42 inches, and together they give me more than enough room to play the campaign. Alright, now setting up one big surface works, but 8 by 7 feet is a pretty sizable area, and you'll probably find it difficult to reach some parts of the map, especially since you'll have to do it for long periods of time. Luckily, there's a good solution suggested by the designer. You can split the maps onto 2 tables, something like I've done in this picture. Maps A, B, and C go on one, and the rest of the maps on the other. With this arrangement, you'll be able to walk around both tables, if you have a big enough room, and most importantly, you'll have easy access to the center of the map, where most of the action takes place. Now, in my case, there are only 2 problems with this setup. The first is that a load-bearing column in the center of my basement means that I barely have enough room, let alone with my tables separated. This one's no big deal. The solution is to slide the table with maps A, B, and C back and forth. When I want access to map A or the beach display, I pull the two tables closer together, allowing me to walk or sit between the table and the wall. And when I want access to the other maps, I just separate them again. Easy enough. Now, the second problem is a little more complicated. My 42-inch wide table is a bit too narrow for the northern maps, and basically this means that maps B and C end up running right along one edge, while map A slightly overhangs the other by about 1/4 of an inch. Now, the overhang is nothing serious because it rests on the neoprene mat underneath, but having no room to spare on the other side means that I can't leave counters on the partial hexes at the edge of the table because they'll either fall or get knocked off the plexiglass. Now, I can always just transfer them over to the other side, where I have room to spare, and can place counters in partial hexes without worrying about them falling onto the floor. But it would be nice to have a table for the northern maps that was maybe 44 inches wide instead of 42, just so I could use those partial hexes at the edge of maps B and C if I wanted to, and so map A wouldn't hang over the other side of the table. Unfortunately, there is another problem with those partial hexes that can't be resolved by a wider table. When maps B and C don't lay over maps D, E, and F, the same partial hexes appear on both sides of the gap between tables. With my setup, for example, hex B3134 appears here at the bottom of map B, and again here at the top of map D. In other words, this section that would otherwise be hidden if the northern maps overlaid the southern maps is visible. Now, for a large part of the campaign, this will only be a nuisance whenever you need to transfer units from one table to another as they move along the primary and secondary roads that cross the gap. But sooner or later, usually once the front line reaches the bottom of maps B and C, you'll have to start being more careful because it will be possible for enemy units to be adjacent to each other, but not be on the same table. For example, this unit appears to have nothing next to it, but in reality there's an enemy unit in hex C5734. It's just in the same hex on the other table, here. Now, just to be clear, neither of these is a serious issue, but you'll probably want to have a system of some kind to keep things from getting messy. Here's what I do, for example. First, I declare all partial hexes along the bottom edge of maps B and C unplayable, meaning no counters can enter them under any circumstances. Basically, any time a unit would move into a partial hex on those maps, it instead gets transferred to the matching hex on the other table. Second, I mark all the corresponding hexes containing primary and secondary roads with matching colored triangles. This makes it easy to transfer units between them, and you can even use alternating colors so that there's no confusion. And finally, I place red tokens on any enemy units adjacent to each other, but located on separate maps. For example, going back to this counter adjacent to an enemy unit in hex C5734, I would place a red token on both, like this and this, just to make sure I don't forget they're in contact. Now, this is not a huge concern either, because almost all combat in the game takes place close to the front line, which probably won't reach the bottom of maps B and C until well into the campaign anyway, but it's definitely worth keeping in mind, especially because of movement halts, vantage points, air observation, and other rules that often depend on the presence of enemy units. Alright, well that should give you a pretty good idea of the space you'll need for the battlefield map, and the advantages and disadvantages of the two setups I've described. In a nutshell, Keeping the battlefield map together means you'll have to spend a lot of time reaching across 3 or 4 feet of space, but you won't have to worry about any of the nuisances I just mentioned. On the other hand, separating the maps onto 2 tables means you won't have as many back problems later in life, but you'll have to work out a system for dealing with the gap between the northern and southern maps. And given how hard it would probably be to change your mind once you're deep into the campaign, I suggest thinking about it carefully before you make the final decision. Okay, well, that's it for now. I hope you found this helpful, and as always, if you have any questions or comments, notice any mistakes, or feel there's something I've missed, please let me know. Whatever you've got to say, I can use it. So, with that, thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.